one of the most exciting things about riding a motorcycle, aside from the freedom of being on two wheels. Now, for many, myself included, it's about hitting the curves and finding that delicate balance of throttle, brake, and lean angle. Going into a curve is probably one of the most intimidating things that any new motorcyclist encounters. It takes practice, determination, and a bit of fearlessness. Now, I know when I first started riding, I would slow down a lot when I encountered a decent curve, almost to the point of keeping the bike upright. Now, I know that's not very cool of me to admit that, but I'm pretty sure most, if not all of us, have done it. You see, there's just this unnatural sensation of taking a 900-pound machine into any curve at 45 plus miles per hour. Your brain is screaming at you to stop the madness. Now, once we get a little more experience with riding, and in general with riding our own motorcycle, we find that we enter these curves with something less than fear and more like exhilaration. Now, I'm sure you've seen the image with the text, "When life throws you a curve, lean into it." Or perhaps you've come across the one that reads, "Happiness isn't around the corner, happiness is the corner." Whether you've seen these images or not, you understand the meaning. What keeps our motorcycle from just simply falling over or sliding out from under us in these curves? The short answer is physics, and we can discuss those finer points later, but that force you feel that is seemingly pushing you outward perpendicular to the curve is an imaginary force called centrifugal motion. Our brain is telling us that the motorcycle is pushing outward from the curve when, in reality, it isn't. Okay, now I know I said no physics, but here's a quick lesson on what I'm talking about. Imagine a ball on the end of a string. If you were to spin the string above your head, you could feel the forces pushing the ball outward. That's centrifugal force. It's your brain telling you that if the string were to break, then the ball would continue to move outward away from you, almost perpendicular to the point of release. However, if the string were to break, the ball would continue on a straight path, tangent to this point on the imaginary circle at a point where the string broke. So what does this crude physics lesson have to do with any sort of biblical principle? Well, I mentioned earlier that centrifugal force is imaginary, right? It's our brain telling us something exists that in fact does not exist. The verse for our devotion this week tells us to trust in the Lord with all our heart and not to lean on our own understanding. Our minds, our own understanding seem to tell us that no man can be raised from the dead. However, faith is set apart from our mental capacity. It transcends what we know and goes right to the heart of what we believe and what we would hold to be the truth. When we rely on our own knowledge, we are removing faith from the equation and, in essence, turning the Bible into a textbook. Faith is what sets a believer apart from the world. There are countless scholars who do not deny that Jesus walked this earth, but they stop at the resurrection. Why do they do that? Because it goes against all they know of our physical world to be true. My own salvation story is very similar in this respect. It wasn't until I removed myself from my own personal knowledge and allowed the words of the Bible to pass through my heart to discover what faith truly is. You see, I had a drug problem when I was growing up. Now, my mom, the first time she heard me say that, about fell over. But the drug problem that I had is my parents drugged me to church. I heard the stories of the Bible and I took them to be just that, stories, perhaps even historical fiction in some cases. My mind was wired to seek concrete facts that could easily be verified. I was leaning on my own understanding. I was baptized at 15 years old with no heart commitment of faith. I honestly, in hindsight, think that I did it just because my friends were getting baptized and it seemed like the next logical process in my growth as a Christian. I thought I would be transformed by that process, but I wasn't. I emerged from that water the same boy that I was before I was submerged. In that moment, I thought that everything had been just some sort of push to get people to believe in God. But that actually proved to be the catch. I could not deny that I believed in God. What I lacked was true faith. Again, I was leaning on my own understanding. Shortly after the birth of my son and after a long departure from the church, I experienced true saving faith. I was baptized at the age of 23, but I was transformed before I was ever submerged in the water. That baptism was, as one pastor put it to me, an outward display of an inner conviction. I did not suspend the knowledge, but I accepted on faith the death, the burial, and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And I've not looked back since then. My own understanding only took me so far, but once I accepted Christ into my heart and experienced the salvation that faith can only provide, I became truly saved. Some people think that being a follower of Christ is akin to intellectual suicide, but that couldn't be further from the truth. By accepting Christ and receiving Him into your heart on faith alone, you become a more complete person. Your path to sanctification begins. Some truths are beyond the comprehension of the most gifted minds. It also requires our heart. Now, faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen.